What's up? This is Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC, and today I'm going to show you how to replace a starter clutch on the CRF250 and 450Xs as well as the TRX450ERs. So what I have right here in my hand is the one-way clutch or starter clutch for this bike, and this is one of the parts that allows the starter motor to turn the engine over. Now, if this goes bad, this is what it's going to sound like. So you can kick start the bike from here, but I know some of you skip leg day, so we're just going to show you how to get it fixed the right way, and that way we can just hit the button, start the bike up. Now, like I mentioned before, this is going to work for the CRF250 and 450X models, as well as the TRX450ERs, but you do want to reference your model-specific service manual for more information and specs. As far as parts go, we have our starter one-way clutch assembly, as well as a reduction gear. Our problem could be caused by either one of these, so I'll show you how to check those once we're in there. And to get that cover off, we're going to need to drain the coolant and transmission fluid, so we have the necessary fluids, as well as our gasket, O-ring, and crush washers to do that, some assembly lube, and contact cleaner. We're going to start out by draining the coolant. And we're going to leave our drain plug out. Now we can drain our transmission fluid with our Tusk 12mm T-handle. And this crush washer was long overdue for replacement. Once the fluid stops coming out, you can reinstall the drain bolt with a new crush washer. Next, we'll remove the brake pedal. And just so the spring isn't tensioned, we're going to remove these bolts from the master cylinder and then remove that brake lever pivot bolt. Then remove the kickstart lever. This one's stuck on there pretty good, so to break it loose, I'm going to put the bolt back on, thread it in a few threads. I'm going to tap on this with the hammer while I pull out, and it should break it free. Now we have this clamp here. Most of them are going to be positioned up a little bit. You might not have to move it, but ours we do. After that, remove the two cooling hoses on the cover. Next, we'll loosen up the hose clamps that are going to the water pump cover, remove the bolts from the cover, and pull that off. And we've got this wire retainer, or this hose retainer. I'm going to move that out of the way. Just pop the hoses on the other side of that. And then before we pull the cover off, I'm actually going to spray the area where this cover is with some contact cleaner and get any dirt away from it. Once everything is clean enough, you'll remove all the cover bolts in a crisscross pattern. Then we'll rock on the cover just a little bit and pull it off. All right, now that we have the cover off, this right here, this is that one-way clutch assembly that we have. This is your reduction gear. You can have problems with either one of these. So I'm going to take the clutch off right now, and then once we get down there, we'll talk about some of those problems. Just like any other clutch removal, you'll loosen these bolts in a crisscross pattern in a few different steps. And if you can, try to take the whole pack out at once. Now we'll remove the push rod and this throwout bearing. Now we have the locking tab on our clutch hub nut. We'll bend that tab over so we can remove the nut. Next, we'll take our clutch holding tool. We're going to lightly clamp this onto the basket. You don't want to damage anything. And then we'll loosen the nut. Pay attention to your washer on the back side. So next we have our gear jammer. I absolutely love this tool. It has the magnet to hold it in place. And we'll break that bolt loose on our primary drive gear. Then we'll remove the clutch basket. Keep in mind you have these needle bearings in here. And then this back side, obviously you have that collar. So keep all that together. So the shaft for this reduction gear came out with our case cover. I'm going to slide that in place for now. Remove this primary gear. Keep in mind these dots need to line up when it goes back together. Then we can remove the one-way clutch and the reduction gear. All right, we're going to start our inspection at the one-way clutch, and this is going to be a big help to us to start here, and I'll tell you why in a second. But this assembly, you want to make sure if you're holding this back side, this gear should only spin counterclockwise and lock up if you try to go clockwise, which ours does. So this piece is actually good, and that means you want to pay special attention to that reduction gear. So right here we have the reduction gear, and I'm just going to use this clutch holding tool. I'm going to lightly clamp down on the smaller gear, and then we can try to move this pressed on gear with our hands. You can, just to show you guys, I'm going to use it with my, or try to move it with my bare hands, but you could use a towel, wrap around there and see if it moves independently. But if I try to rock this back and forth, you can see that thing is spinning on the shaft it's supposed to be pressed to, and we know this piece is bad. But before we go back together, we want to scrape off any remaining gasket material and get the surface cleaned up. We'll install the shaft and reduction gear. And don't forget, we have this missing tooth. This is going to be lined up with the dot. And we'll line up our gears, make sure that slid all the way down. And we'll install the primary drive gear, same thing with the dots. Then we'll install the primary drive gear bolt. Then we can install our collar and our two needle bearings and the clutch basket. We have the washer and the clutch hub. Then the locking washer, it's not a bad idea to replace that. Plain washer and the nut. And we'll torque this nut to 59 foot-pounds. And before you forget, you want to get in there and bend the tab on that locking washer down. Then we'll torque the primary drive gear bolt down to 80 foot-pounds. Next, we'll reinstall the clutch plates. We'll just install them one plate at a time. Now we can install the push rod and the throwout bearing. Don't forget the washer that goes on the very end. Then we can install the pressure plate, and we'll install the 6 springs and bolts, and we'll tighten those down in a crisscross pattern in several steps and then torque them to 9 foot-pounds. Next, we'll install all of our dowel pins. Don't forget the O-ring that goes around that cooling dowel. Then we'll install our gasket. I have a bunch of grease on this gasket. That's just going to help if we ever have to take this back off. It's going to be a lot easier to clean up the surface. All right, now to install the case. I've greased up our seal, and then we're going to make sure that this notch on the back of that water pump shaft aligns with this notch. So we're going to line it up as best as we can and then rotate the impeller. With the cover installed all the way, just make sure that this impeller is engaged. Now we can reinstall our cover bolts, and we'll torque those down to spec in a crisscross pattern. All right, now we'll install the water pump cover with the new O-ring. After that, we'll fill the radiator with coolant and install the radiator cap. All right, for transmission fluid on this bike, it calls for 650 milliliters. So on this is 946, and then it has a mark at 296. So if we take the level down to that, that's going to be exactly 650 milliliters. This bottle just makes it super convenient. Now, even though we measured this fluid out, since we had everything apart, this case could take just a little bit more. So you always want to check this check bolt right here and make sure your fluid is all the way topped up. At this point, we can double check our work. Now, one thing I do want to point out is once the engine is brought up to operating temperature, let it cool down completely and then double check the levels on your fluids. All right, and that's it. That's going to be a lot easier than having to kickstart this bike. If you need these parts, check out our website. You can look under the OEM diagrams or see what else we have available aftermarket. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.